Blizzard has just announced updated affixes for the new War Within expansion, so today in this video I wanted to talk about them, give my opinion, because it seems like everyone else has. Now, I am a day late on this. This was announced yesterday at the time of recording this video. I tried recording it last night, but I ate a little bit too much of a big edible, so here we are again on day 2, trying to get this video out. Anyways, let's just dive into this one. So this is actually a pretty big blue post from Blizzard. I'm going to leave some of the articles revolving around this post in the description below, so feel free to check them out yourself if you're looking to give them a read. But let's just kind of talk about this. I'll go through it. I won't read everything, but I'll kind of just talk about major talking points and mostly focusing on both the affixes as well as like the dungeon rotation. So in their blue post, they did highlight what has changed between like normal, heroic, and mythic difficulties. If you aren't aware or you took season 4 off in Dragonflight, they have reworked the scaling on dungeons to make a more streamlined progression curve for players, especially those who want to get into like Mythic 0 content without feeling the pressure, like I would say more difficult content without feeling the pressure of like a timer and a fix and stuff like that. So the article talks a little bit about that, and then they go over what the dungeon rotation is going to be for the first season, which will be 4 War Within dungeons, which includes Stone Vault, Dawnbreaker, City of Echoes, which is also referred to as Arakara, and City of Thread. So those 4 dungeons will be available. I will of course be doing Mythic Plus guides on them come that time, like closer to the expansion's launch. We're still going to have access to Mythic Zeros, if I'm not mistaken, of the other 4 dungeons, but these will be in the Season 1 rotation. And accompanied with that, similar like what we've seen in Dragonflight, is that we're going to have rotating dungeons, or not rotating dungeons, but like recycled dungeons. So it's going to include Grim Battle from the Cataclysm expansion, Necrotic Wake and Mist of Tyranid Scythe from Shadowlands, and Siege of Borealis from BFA. I don't know if I'm going to talk about them here. I kind of want to wait to do them during like once I can actually Mythic test them, but I'm not thrilled about this lineup, if I'm being totally honest. Dawnbreaker and City of Threads have a lot of apparent issues to me in the first season, or at least in the dungeon pool. I'm not sure about the Grim Battle rework. We've seen Cata dungeons get reworked. We've seen Throne of the Tides and Vortex Pinnacle. Some good, some bad came out of both of those dungeons, so we can expect the same for Grim Battle. Necrotic Wake and Mists, obviously that was an, during the Shadowlands expansion, they had like a lot of gimmicks to them. You had to be the right covenants. You had kind of these powers in Necrotic Wake, like these weapons. And if you messed up or you wiped on a pull, you would lose the weapon. And then it made the dungeon more difficult. So I'm hoping they remove a lot of those like gimmicky aspects. I hope that if they do keep the covenant bonuses in. So if you don't remember Necrotic Wake, you had a couple of robots throughout the dungeon that would give your group pulsing AoE damage. And in Mist of Tyranid Scythe, you of course had checkpoints for being Night Fae, as well as the mushrooms before the first boss that would amplify your like main stat and stuff. I hope they either make it universal or they get rid of them altogether, but obviously then we'll need to see some tuning to the actual dungeon, but time will tell on those. But the meat of this video I really want to talk about are the new affixes and the removal of some, or the retiring of some affixes that we've been used to seeing. So they are talking about how the affixes are going to scale into key levels. So of course, Fortified Tyrannical will come into play at level 2. Everyone has their opinion about Fortified Tyrannical, whether they should still exist or not. That's not the point of this video. At level 4, the new set of passive affixes are going to come into play, and they've essentially retired every single plus or level 4 affix. And then at level 7, it'll be like Bursting, Bolstering, Sanguine, etc. All right, so let's talk about these affixes. Their idea, and they outline this in the blue post, is we would like to outline our goals and the purpose of these affixes. Our overarching goal is to minimize the mechanical overlap between affixes and dungeon trash design in the current +4 affix bucket. We aim to achieve this through a more passive approach, focusing on the following objectives: shifting the source of challenge in the dungeon itself by simplifying the affix design and emphasizing creature abilities. Reduce visual noise, nameplate clutter, and the cognitive load on players during trash combat, and also allowed for varied and context-specific gameplay decisions depending on the group they are applied to. So with that being said, let's talk about these affixes, and then I'll give my overall opinion. First, we have Reckless, and you're going to notice a theme with these, but let me just read through them, and then I'll kind of talk about each one. So non-boss enemies, so all trash mobs, without mana, so basically physical mobs, ignore 20% of armor with their attacks. But their armor is reduced by 30%, and they take 10% increased arcane damage. So basically, they deal more damage with their physical attacks, but they will also be taking more physical damage, and they'll be taking more arcane damage as well. So this is going to benefit, obviously, things like an Arcane Mage, Demon Hunters. It's also going to basically amplify all physical damage being dealt. So things like, Warrior will be really strong. Things like Feral Druid, maybe, Windwalker, of course, Brewmaster, etc., etc. That's pretty cool. So basically, melee mobs ignore... This is essentially a tank affix. It's going to ignore armor. A little bit more problematic for things like plate tanks, so your Blood Death Knight, your Protection Warrior, and your Protection Paladin, and slightly less problematic for things like Brewmaster, Vengeance Demon Hunter, and Guardian Druid, though it could be problematic for Guardian Druid still. But anyways, pretty simple effects. And you're going to notice this with the rest of them. So next we have Thorned. So non-boss enemies without mana, so same thing, kind of physical mobs, will inflict physical damage to their attackers when attacked, but take 10% increased holy and shadow damage. So this week, when Thorned is in effect, it's almost going to feel like a healer affix, because every time you hit an enemy that doesn't have a mana pool, they're going to just reflect a portion of the attack. Now, we don't know what the modifier is on this. We don't know if it's a flat value that's going to scale with key level, or if it's based on the actual hit being done to them. So if you hit a mob for 100k and it reflects, 10% of the attack, are you going to take 10k damage? What if you hit them for 1,000,000? Now you're taking 100k damage. So I'm not sure if it's going to scale with your actual damaging abilities, or just it's going to reflect a set amount scaling with key level. I'd imagine this would probably cap out around the 20 level mark, similar like, things like Spiteful as well as Bursting. But we'll have to see. But things like Holy, Retribution Paladin, as well as like Shadow Priests and any other type of like Shadow and Holy damage abilities will deal 10% more damage. So that's cool, whatever. Attuned, non-boss enemies with mana, so all caster mobs will be dealing 20% increased magic damage, but they take 10% increased nature damage and 30% increased damage from bleed effects. So things like feral druids, assassination rogues are going to be doing more damage. Nature damage, obviously a lot of things do nature. You have your elemental shamans, you have balanced druids in a way, but any nature-based ability will basically be doing more damage. Now, I can see this affix being a little bit more problematic because it's a flat 20% damage increase on all magic damage, so that increases spot healing that's going to be required from things like bolts. Missed kicks are going to be way more punishing on this type of week, as well as, group damage. If there's like group shadow damage being inflicted by a caster mob, now you're taking more damage, which is obviously going to have an interesting modification with Fortified. So Fortified attuned weeks might be very, very deadly for a lot of groups. This is definitely this is essentially a lot more problematic than like Reckless. Reckless is really just affecting the tank and maybe some other like AoE abilities like affecting armor, but it's not that big of an increase, I think, compared to the flat 20% damage on all magic. But anyways, there's one last affix called Focused. Non-boss enemies with mana, so all casters, have 30% increased haste, but take 10% increased frost and fire damage. This is going to put more of an emphasis on making sure you have AoE stops as well as kicks, and they're really getting done. Obviously, like a 30% increased haste could be more problematic than a 20% increased magic damage, but they are going to be taking more damage from frost and fire, so things like mages, shamans, obviously like things like Breath of Fire from a Brewmaster Monk being more specific. So you're getting these damage increases from week to week in different schools of magic, but certain mobs in the dungeon are going to deal more damage. And it's, again, like Blizzard said, it's more of an emphasis on actual dungeon mechanics than it is on your, like dispel this random mob every minute. Remove your root every 30 seconds from entangling. So basically, they're replacing these affixes that cause more visual clutter as well as complications with boss mechanics and really putting a lot of the damage increase into the mobs themselves. I think this is a good philosophy. I'm not sure how I feel about the rotating increased damage, though. There are pros and cons to it, of course. Things like Feral Druid might be very popular when it's attuned, right? Mobs are going to be taking more damage from bleed effects. Feral Druid's going to be really strong that week. So it might incentivize players to shift away from the meta a little bit in your 5th DPS spot, or 3rd DPS slot, I should say. Because now all of a sudden you can think about like, oh wow, okay, so this thing that does 90% of their damage with bleeds is now going to be doing 30% more damage in this dungeon because, well, it's attuned. An Arcane Mage is going to pop off on Reckless weeks because mobs are taking 10% more damage. So there's like, that's cool. I think that's great, and it definitely incentivizes a broader spectrum that people can look at when deciding on their dungeon group from week to week. Now, of course, there's the problem where attuned, the 20% increased magical damage sounds way more problematic than 20% increased or attacks ignoring 20% armor. There's a pretty large disparity there. So it's going to be interesting to see how these affixes actually come into play. Now, it looks like Blizzard did announce that they're going to rotate each day on beta for people to test. I don't know if it's going to be like a forced testing where you have to play around that, but I'm interested to try them anyways, but it seems like they're going to try to rotate them on beta to get a good amount of data. Anyways, so what's being removed then, if these are coming into play? Well, they're removing 5 affixes. They are removing Afflicted, Incorporeal, Entangling, Storming, and Volcanic. Afflicted and Incorporeal, I think, are really bad. I think they're, bad design. They cause a lot of issues with groups, and they actually restrict how many comps and classes can actually come to the key, because yes, while a lot of classes can dispel Afflicted, not all of them can path easily to get a dispel without jeopardizing a lot of their damage or other utility. It's the same thing with Incorporeal for, CC. A lot of classes really struggle at CCing mobs, where you have things like Hunter who can pre-throw down a frozen trap before anything really happens. So these affixes being removed are great. I think Entangling is fine. Like, I wasn't a fan of it, but, being primarily a Brewmaster player, things like Tiger's Lust, things like Freedom on the Paladin made this affix extremely easy. Storming was just obnoxious in a lot of scenarios, and definitely was very punishing on certain boss mechanics. And Volcanic being removed, I'm sad to see it go. It's one of those affixes where when it is a current affix, you don't even realize that the affix exists, because very rarely, I'll literally be playing a key and I'll be like, oh wait, why did I just get knocked up? What knock? Oh, it's Volcanic week, So I'm a little sad to see it go because it's so easy. And essentially these are going and they're going to replace with the new affixes I just went over. So what's staying then? So we have Raging, Bolstering, Bursting, and Sanguine. Now, out of these bunch, I would say that maybe 3 of the 4 are definitely a pretty big no-no for a lot of players. Not a lot of people like Raging, not a lot of people like Bolstering, and not a lot of people like Sanguine. Now, luckily, the affixes have been nerfed significantly over the years, and they're nothing what they used to be. Sanguine used to last a minute. Bolstering used to bolster bosses and health. Raging used to make mobs also deal a ton more damage. And Bursting used to go beyond the cap of the key level 20. So, overall, the affixes that they're keeping are not fan favorites, but I don't know. I think Mythic Plus is definitely in a stage where it now needs to be overhauled significantly. And I think this is a step in the right direction, but I don't think they can resolve anything in one beta cycle. So for the time being, I guess, let's be patient. Let's see what else is going to happen. They also did note at the very bottom, we are still experimenting with how these affixes are going to, fit in with our updates, meaning tyrannical versus fortified affixes. We believe that these changes will offer a refreshing experience for players at each level in all seasons and redefine on how Mythic Plus affix system works and influences dungeon gameplay. We look forward to your feedback and discussion on these topics, and we will see you in dungeons. That was Blizzard's kind of final note. So my overall thought, I'm okay with these new affixes. I'd like to see how they really scale, though, because it seems like the ones that benefit or bolster the casters in a dungeon are going to be severely more punishing than the ones that increase just the physical damage taken, because that more often than not just affects the tanks. Obviously, with Thorned being a reflection-esque mechanic, I don't know if I want to see if it's going to be a raw value or if it's going to be a percentage of each attack, because things like Brewmaster might really struggle this week because we have things like Rushing Jade Wind and a lot of other tertiary damage sources that come from procs and just auras, and we deal damage very fast, just not in large increments. But if it's like that, it might really negatively affect the Brewmaster monk that week. So I'm hesitant to say that these are good. I think that's a step in the right direction, especially the Kiss Curse aspect of it. Mobs do more damage, but you also do more damage. But we're just gonna have to wait and see. So I'm excited to test these. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are down below. And of course, big shout out to all my Patreon supporters, because without you guys, I wouldn't be able to make videos like this. I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.